was a story from the life of Paramahansa Yogananda where he was visited by a scholarly gentleman who wanted to interview him, and this was at Mount Washington, where his ashram was located in Los Angeles. And the gentleman arranged the interview, and when it began, he outlined a very philosophical question, scholarly philosophical question, a bit pedantic perhaps. And Paramahansa Yogananda, Master, replied very simply, looking at the man, he said, "Love God." Well, that wasn't exactly what the interviewer was hoping for. He was hoping for something a little bit longer and in-depth and perhaps scholarly. And so he asked the second question, somewhat along the same lines, and again, Master simply said, but a little bit louder, "Love God." And the man was slightly taken aback, thinking perhaps Yogananda didn't understand what he was after, perhaps maybe even thought that Yogananda didn't know the answer to what he was asking. After all, he was a great master, but who knows, perhaps he wasn't quite as wise as this man had been led to believe. And so he asked a third question along, again, similar lines, somewhat of a pedantic, scholarly, philosophical question. And once more, Yogananda answered, but this time in a very loud voice, "Love God." With force, he then got up and exited, and the interview was over. Well, obviously, Master was trying to make a point to this man, but the point that he was making was a universal point and something very critical for our understanding of the spiritual path, what this life is about, and also particularly today for our reading of the Bhagavad Gita. As I mentioned, we've now come to the 18th chapter, and actually we're concluding the 18th chapter today. And so we've looked back and we've been studying now, week after week, month after month, we've been studying the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna's struggles, his wish not to fight the battle in the first place, seeing the two armies and being despondent, and Krishna uplifting him, inspiring him, instructing him, telling him he must fight this battle and why it's necessary for him to fight this battle. And he explains it in depth from every angle possible, and Arjuna is absorbing this and eventually gives him the divine sight to actually experience the reality, this divine reality that all saints, all mankind is looking for, this unity. And Krishna goes on explaining the very nature of this universe, revealing this knowledge, the hidden knowledge and also the outward knowledge of how to behave in this world to Arjuna. And Arjuna in this case is of course representing you and I, the devotee. This battle is taking place within us, and we come to the 18th chapter where Krishna then sums it up. All of the things that he's said, the explanations, the 700 stanzas that have preceded up to this point, he sums it up with these final verses. "Again, hear me now, my supreme word, the most secret and sacred of all, because you are dearly beloved by me. I offer it now for your highest benefit. Absorb yourself in me. Be wholly devoted to me. Worship and bow to me alone. So shall you undoubtedly reach me. This I promise you faithfully, for you are dear to me. Forsaking all other dharmas, remember me alone. I will free you from all sin. Do not grieve." Now that's so very comforting. I'll go on a little bit later with more. So very comforting. He says, do not grieve. That all of the grief that we leave behind, sometimes we feel that we love God, we want to give ourselves to God, but yet we think perhaps, perhaps I'm not worthy of this love. Look at all those things I'm having to leave behind and all the turmoil of this battle that we have had to go through. And Krishna as representing the divine, says, do not grieve. Krishna representing the Guru, saying, do not grieve. Krishna representing the Divine Mother, do not grieve. And this is the universal message. Do not grieve, and in its place, love me, worship me, give everything to me, give your life to me. And this is not, as some might think who are not familiar with scripture, this great scripture of the Gita, some might think that, oh, this is a sectarian message that is being given. But no, this is the essential message that is given by all great scripture. Look at the Bible. Christ says to his disciples, love the Lord with all of thy heart, with all of thy soul, and with all of thy mind. This is the highest commandment. And onto it, the second commandment, love thy neighbor as thyself. Onto these two commandments hang all the prophets in the scriptures. And in a sense, this is the essence of all scripture, whether it be east, west. A true religion has this as its goal, is to love God, just as Yogananda said to that scholar. This is to what everything leads, the spiritual path itself, is that absorption and that unity that we leave behind, all of those things that separate us. And what is love? It's that absorption, the leaving behind of ego, leaving behind that sense of I and mine, this sense of being separate from this ultimate reality of which we are a part as a child of God. This is why we do this spiritual path, and what is the calling actually of our soul. This soul wandering lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, wandering in this world of Maya, this world of separation. There's always that little spark that's within there calling us to come back to God. And this is what we want. This is what the soul ultimately wants, is to find itself once more in unity with the divine. And so we go out and we have to find our way back like prodigal children. But it's a struggle. It's a struggle. And make no mistake, this is not easy to do. It is a struggle, but in a sense, it's like a good story. You have to have, think of a movie, a film where everything works out perfectly and there's no struggle to it. How boring would that be? So in a sense, you could say this is, as the scriptures say, or as the ancients say, this is God's play. And in order to make this play interesting, we have to have a struggle. And so we struggle and struggle until finally we attain ultimately what is our heart's desire. So this is the essence of what the spiritual path is about. Now Krishna says here, forsaking all duties. Now some people, I read a commentary recently of somebody who was saying, well, what Krishna is saying, he says, don't give up all of your responsibilities in the life and simply dedicate yourself to the spiritual life. Well, I guess in a sense you could say that, but it's really the way that is written is misinterpretation. He's saying, this is your highest duty. When a lower duty conflicts with the higher duty, the lower duty is no longer a duty. But yet, in some mysterious way, we find that even lower duties are fulfilled when we do the performance of the higher duty, because the higher duty encompasses every other duty below it. And you'll find that sometimes on the spiritual path, we're in this position of conflict where we feel that, oh, should I do this, should I do that, and what if I seek God, am I somehow going to be abandoning those things that are rightfully mine to do in life? And it holds people back. But you find the spiritual path, as in most things in life, never need to be framed in an either or dichotomy. Usually it's both and, but both and implies learning which is the most important. And if we pick life up from the proper point, we find that all of our other duties naturally fall in line with that, because this is our divine destiny. This is what God is calling us to do, is to love God. Do that first, and all these other things will be added unto you. And this is the great secret and the message that we're trying to learn in life. And this is what the message is of Krishna to Arjuna, having to go through all of that struggle to be able to come to that point of understanding. Now, Krishna goes on. Let me read. We're at the conclusion, so I'm going to continue. He goes on to say, never share these truths with one who is without self-control or devotion, nor with one who won't share with others in a spirit of service, nor give them to one who is indifferent to them, or who finds fault with me. And of course, if a person is unready to receive these teachings, well, what use is it to give them? It's really somewhat, perhaps even sets them back a little bit to give people teachings, sacred teachings that they don't understand. If we want to, we have to have that spirit, as Krishna is going to say in the next stanza. We have to have that experience or that inspiration to be able to share with other peoples. But when we're sharing with other people, our job is to find those things that will be appropriate for that person to take the next step. When the whole spiritual path is summed up for each of us, is not so much in terms of attaining some far-off goal. This is actually a mistake in our mind if we think that God is far away. God is actually with us right now in every moment. The important point is not so much attaining something that we don't have. We have it already, but learning to point ourselves in the right direction, to take that first step. And so for each person on the spiritual path, in the path of life, which is the spiritual path, is to point themselves in the direction. Which way am I pointing? And then to take the next appropriate step. And so for all of us who want to share these teachings, and we're in that position, all of us are, to be able to share whatever joy we have, because this is what the teachings truly is that inner joy. To share that joy with other people is to find out what's the appropriate way to be able to share that joy with others so that they too are uplifted. So Krishna goes on. Whoever will, with supreme devotion, impart this secret knowledge to my devotees shall, without doubt, come to me. No one among men performs a more priceless service to me, nor is there in all the world anyone more dear to me. Now, what he's really saying is that same thing that Paramahansa Yogananda said to his disciples when they were asked, or he asked them, to be in tune with him. He advised them, he says, if you want to really progress on the spiritual path, be in tune with me. Now, he was the guru, of course, speaking to the disciples. He didn't necessarily speak that way to the public at large because, again, going back, they wouldn't have understood what he was saying to them. So he had to say the teachings and present the teachings in a way that the public at large would understand and take that directional step. But to those who had the finer understanding, those who had ears to hear, to be able to hear what he had to say, he would say the important thing, and he stressed to the disciples, is to be in tune. And he was naturally asked, well, Master, how is it that we are to be in tune with thee? And one of the things he said was very interesting. He said, serve my work. Now, here again, Krishna is saying the exact same thing. Impart this knowledge. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you give Gita discourses, or it doesn't necessarily mean you go on a soapbox and stand on the corner and speak gospel to the passers-by. That's not what he's speaking. What he's saying is be a channel for the teachings that that has been imparted to you. You too have a responsibility to be able to take what has been given to you and not hold it for your own, or then to grasp it for yourself, but to be a channel and to be able to share that appropriately. The spirit of what's been shared with you. The great scripture is a spirit of joy. It's a spirit of light. It's a spirit of inspiration, spirit of love. To be able to share that spirit with other people and be a channel for that. In the process of doing that, you're sharing God. In a sense, you're sharing Krishna in this case. The essence of what Krishna is what we're sharing. And that essence is love, it's joy, it's bliss. This is what is our responsibility as disciples, to be able to share. So Krishna exhorts Arjuna in that case. No one among men performs a more priceless service to me, nor is there in all the world anyone more dear to me. Because in a sense, by being an instrument, you take on the quality of that which you are sharing. As Paramahansa Yogananda said, and as Swami Kriyananda reiterated many times, the instrument is blessed by that which flows through it. In a sense, we become that because we're an instrument of that. We forget the little self in the desire and in the effort and in the performance of sharing God with other people. Not God in an outward sectarian sense, but the spirit of the divine. That's the disciples and that's the devotee's responsibility in life. Whoever studies and intuitively understands the sacred dialogue between us will worship me by the sacrifice, self-offering of wisdom. Such is my holy declaration. So to even try to understand is also an act of devotional service. Oftentimes we feel that the spiritual path, how can I possibly make it to that end goal that's been promised to us? Remember also what Krishna has promised. He says it's He who will lift us up. It's not we so much that we're struggling. We present the spiritual path seems to be a great struggle, that I have to climb that mountain of my spiritual sense, and I am doing the work. Little do we know that actually there's a helping hand pulling us up. Our job is to open ourselves to be able to receive that grace. Our job is to put ourselves in position to be able to be lifted up. And God lifts us up. So the very study, the very desire to want God, the very desire to want to share these is enough to open the door to be able to allow God to reach in, to uplift us. And he goes on to say, even that person who, full of devotion and without skepticism, merely listens to this holy discourse and heeds its teachings shall become free from earthly karma and shall be blessed to dwell in the high realm of the virtuous. I wonder, it's said here in an outward way, who even listens to this scripture, and this I believe to be literally true, to be able to listen, but to listen not just with the physical ear, but I think he's saying here to listen with the inner ear, listen with the intuition, to be intuitive of what's being imparted. And on the deeper level, we have to understand also that this Bhagavad Gita is a scripture that's explaining what's going on within each one of us, the Guru reaching down, imparting knowledge to us, and the soul itself, the little self, trying to merge itself in the higher self, the disciple, trying to intuitively open oneself to the whispers of the Guru reaching down to bless us. So this listening to the scripture, I think, literally on the outward interpretation is certainly correct, but I think that listening is also to listen to the scripture of the Guru's voice, uplifting us, God's voice, talking to us, pulling us, or you might say enticing us upward in our spiritual journey to God. Even that person who full of devotion shall be blessed to dwell in the high realms. Partha, meaning Arjuna, have you received this wisdom with holy, uplifted consciousness? Has your delusion-born ignorance, so done in Jaya, now been dispelled? And Arjuna answered, my delusion has been demolished. I have, by your grace, O Krishna, regained the memory of my soul I stand firm now, all my doubts and questions answered and dissipated. I will act according to your word. Now in that stanza right there, so many important messages. I have by your grace, O Krishna, regained the memory of your soul. And this is in a sense grace, but also memory. This is something, it's not foreign to us. The whole spiritual path is explained through the concept or the word of Shruti, that divine memory. It's ours all along. Just, I remember. And so often when you have a spiritual experience, when you have an intuitive understanding, it's as if it was there all the time. I remember this, I know this, because it's truly who and what we really are. I've regained my memory. I stand firm now. All my doubts and questions answered and dissipated. And then he ends with this, I will act according to your word. In the previous reading last week, one of the stanzas says that after Krishna had explained the whole Gita up to that point, just prior to where we started tonight, he had to explain the goal of the Gita. He completed his discourse summary, all the hundreds of stanzas, and he says, now, Arjuna, do as thy will. In other words, choose. You do. It's you. You can do as I have advised or not. It's up to you. God will not impose upon us. God offers. Through this, through the Guru offers. And it's then up to us to be able to accept what the Guru has offered, accept what God has offered to us, accept the guidance that has come to us. We don't manufacture it, we receive. And to be able to accept, and if we do, by our own free will, we take a step forward, we act. And that action is in every moment of our life. There is no tomorrow, there is no next hour, there's no past even, it's all the eternal now. This moment, the Gita is taking place right now. In each and every moment, we are faced with that army that's before us, the two sides of the Kauravas and the Pandavas, fighting this battle, this struggle, right now within us. And we receive that guidance by God's grace, by Guru's grace, and then we must choose, and we must act, making that directional, pointing ourselves in the proper direction to allow God, to allow Krishna to be able to uplift us and help us. Remember, God is always there. It seems sometimes in the midst of the battle that we're very alone, but God is always there, watching, helping, and when our struggles and our trials are sometimes at their most desperate, remember that divine presence, that divine hand right behind your thoughts, right behind your feelings. He's there. And the spiritual path, you might say, is remembering that fact. God is there, and then drawing on that divine blessing, that divine guiding hand to come into your life in a dynamic way, to be able to help you to go forward, hand in hand, going forward toward the light. Now, this is our last in a long succession of discourses that concludes our discussion of the Bhagavad Gita. And it's been my great pleasure to be able to participate in this, and on behalf of Nayaswami Devrishi, who sometimes also came to my aid when I could not participate, and also to Brahmachari Aditya, who also participated in these discourses. We'd like to extend to all of you who've been our faithful participants in this series. We're very grateful for your participation. It's been a joy for us to be able to share with you on these webinars on Friday nights. We're going to suspend our webinars now for a little while, and we'll have other alternate programs. And then later in the year, we have yet to decide exactly what we're going to do and what we're going to focus on. But later in the year, we will then again, Devrishi, myself, others, Aditya ji, and other of the acharyas will take up, again, presenting programs on one of the scriptures perhaps, or one of the aspects of the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda to share with you. So much joy to you. And as always, if you have questions, comments on either this topic that we've shared with you over these last weeks, or 2 years actually, if you can always email to us, email in to the email address provided, and one of us, myself or the others, will be happy to respond to you. So God bless you, may the Masters bless you, may Krishna be with you, O Arjuna, that Arjuna within all of us. Many blessings to you.